treat puberty like a superpower, because it is. Puberty is happening younger and younger in girls. Girls are entering puberty at 11. The earlier a girl enters puberty, the greater risk she's at for cancer and disease as an adult. And boys are not immune. It's really fascinating. If you look at a lot of middle school boys, they actually have breasts. They have developing breasts. And that's because they're also getting the larger signals of estrogen as well. So where have you been? You've been living under a rock.
So let's get tactical. We'll do rapid fire from a dad's perspective. These are some of the burning questions. Shaving legs, when to have that discussion, ear piercing, the period talk, wearing makeup.
I think those are the big takeaways of a dad. They want to belong. They yearn to belong. You are the original influencer.
What can dads do to really make their daughters value themselves more? Is there anything that you want dads in general to know that you think is super important? Guys, we have a treat for you today. I was able to score an interview with Kim Grustas. She runs Good For You Girls, which is a skincare company just for girls. More importantly though, she knows all things puberty and how to raise girls, things that I am just getting used to now that I have a 3-year-old girl. So I went through and asked her all of the deep questions that you and I probably have for somebody of her caliber. This is a great interview. She's got a ton of knowledge to pass along. Absolutely stay through this one. And if you have more questions, put them in the comments below and I'll bring her back on and we can continue that conversation. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kim Grustas. Now let's get right to it. Your mission, Kim, is inspiring moms to protect what's most precious and teaching girls at a crucial age to respect their bodies and make safer choices for a beautiful, healthy future. It's a great mission. I love what you're doing. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So my introduction, I was a fitness nut in the day. And I worked with bodybuilding companies, sport nutrition companies. That was really my wheelhouse. And so I worked with ingestibles, protein powders, amino acids, creatines, all that. So I knew very well what we put in our bodies mattered. And then I started my own, I'm a creative director by trade. So I started my own advertising agency in 2000. And it was just the inception of natural products, really with the very beginning of the natural products industry. So I started working with natural product companies and I loved them. I loved their passion. I loved their information. So fast forward to 2008, when my daughters were tweens, I really was ahead of the curve in recognizing the dangers of what we call estrogenic chemicals in a young girl's developing body. So all of my past experience and my knowledge and my passion for my daughters, who both suffered from severe asthma and allergies as children, really culminated in me launching this brand. I can't compete with Procter & Gamble and Unilever and all that stuff. I do my thing. I am as passionate today as I was in 2008 when I launched it. My customers are amazing. I really have grown organically because the ethics that I have about my products are also the ethics that I have social media. And that does limit me because I do not market to children.
Yeah.
So I have put a cap on how I advertise, how I market, how I reach my demographic, and I reach it through moms and parents. I will not go directly to the girls, directly, which, I don't use social media influencers. I don't believe that, so again, it's my passion. It's the choices that I make as a small brand. And I think my customers appreciate everything that I do. So.
Well, and as a dad, I so appreciate that because there's always people trying to get a hold of my kiddos on social media and whereabouts. So for you to have that ethic and moral appreciation for that, that's very appreciative. I want to dive more into the skincare side of it, but let's jump in, if you don't mind, and talk a little bit more about puberty in girls in particular, and we'll really get a good appreciation for that. As a dad of a 3-year-old girl, it's a long way off for me, but I know it's on the horizon.
You think it's a long way off, but you're
right.
Really in a very enviable position because you're going to give you some little nuggets here today. And I do envy parents who are just at the beginning of it because they really have the ability to do it right. In my generation, it was, suck it up, get over it, puberty. I had a lot of puberty trauma around my development developmental age. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to do this to my girls. If I'm ever a girl mom, I'm going to do it completely different. And obviously I did, very different. So here's the reality is that puberty is happening younger and younger in girls. Right. So we're no longer entering puberty at 14, 15, 16. Girls are entering puberty at 11. It's 11 to 13. And the average age is actually 11. And what's also happening is breast development used to happen with puberty. Breast development is actually now happening almost 2 years earlier. Okay. So there's a whole psychological developmental component with our girls, right? They're experiencing things that they're really not ready for. Physically, mentally, and it can be really, really challenging. And it's also challenging for parents because, especially moms saying, well, I don't remember going through that, right? And what I love to teach parents is puberty is not about the reproductive system entirely, right? Puberty happens in the hypothalamus and then the pituitary gland and the adrenal glands. And I like to think of it as a cascade, right? It's a very gentle cascade that's happening within their bodies. And I love to teach parents to treat puberty like a superpower because it is. And I think when girls are really taught that this is not something to suck up and get over, that what's happening in their bodies is truly remarkable, I think it's a game changer, right? I think we develop the conversation around the empathy, right? And remembering really, truly what their bodies are trying to do. And that it's happening so much earlier than we realize, right? So that this cascade, and there's definitely, I talk about signs of puberty. You mark the door when they're growing, right? With pencil or pen, right? Everybody does that.
Yep, I hope everybody 3 of them.
Well, when you see those growth spurts, right? That's the time. It's not Jack and the Beanstalk. You're growing for a reason. And kids, I'm growing, right? And when they're little, they're just little balls. They bounce all over, right? There's just not much. But when they start hitting 7, 8, right, they started really understanding the changes that are happening in their bodies. So when you see those growth spurts on the door, now's the time to start talking hormones. Right. And as a woman, hormones are going to be a part of your life forever and ever and ever. You can't make them the bad guys. And what happens a lot is we don't start talking about hormones until it's in relation to reproduction. And that can be truly scary because hormones are your friend, right? It's your blood, it's your bones, it's your brain. All of the functions of your body are developed because of hormones. So hormones are your friends. And I find it funny that, we have this conversation with girls, not so much boys, right? Because it's right. There's that disconnect. But when a girl can be friends with this transformation in her body of hormones and use it in a positive, think of it in a positive way, it really just sets her up. And there's also some other in middle school, right? We have the attachment. Right. It's the oxytocin. We start to see clicks happening. Right. This is, again, an early sign where, they're really getting attached to one friend versus another or feeling excluded. That's the oxytocin and what we call the cuddle chemical. Right. So early on, that's also a conversation starter. Right. To say, OK, she's really attached. What's happening here? Oh, I recognize this. This is the cuddle chemical. Let's talk about it. Let's give her ways to kind of come down from that. If she's experiencing a lot of that anxiety, how can we give her the tools to start with that? As she gets a little bit older, bathing is going to be a big deal, right? Privacy is going to be a big deal, right? So, when she's in the bathroom and your daughter's 3, one of the best things we can do when they're little, when you're bathing them, is teach them how to bathe. Right? I think people that give a bar of soap and, bar of soap is it's glycerin. A bar of soap is just glycerin and it's just going to glide down your body and you're not scrubbing your body. Right? So when we know that puberty is coming down the line and it's really the bacteria, that's causing the body odor underarms in the genitals, we have to scrub it head to toe, top to bottom. That's why I promote a body wash, because you have a face cloth and you scrub. And the other thing that's happening in your scrubbing, so when they're little, scrub, like scrub, where they're not afraid to touch their bodies. I know it sounds so ridiculous because we think, oh yeah, we touch our bodies in the shower. But they do, as their bodies are changing, they sort of have this disconnect. They don't want to touch. They don't want to touch it, right? So the other thing that's super important for girls in scrubbing the armpits, it's actually moving the lymphatic system. So in your, in your armpits, in your groin, our whole lymphatic system in our body, and that's really, really healthy, is to start. So even little, you can teach them the proper way to, bathe. But that's
so much to go into.
I know, it's so fun. Like it's just, and again, you're getting there, so you'll recognize a lot of that, which is exciting.
Yeah, there were a couple of things I want to touch on with that. First, why, in your opinion, is puberty starting sooner for girls in particular?
Yeah, so they are exposed to what we call estrogenic chemicals, more estrogenic chemicals. The way I like to explain it is you eat a protein, your body knows what to do with it. You eat a carbohydrate, you eat a fat. Your body's an organic being, so it knows what to do with it. So now you're introducing your body to synthetic dyes, fragrance, chemicals, right? The closest chemical compound that your body thinks it is estrogen. So that's meaning it's mimicking estrogen in the body, right? So when you have this cascade, girls' bodies are waiting for these signals of estrogen. Now you're giving them false signals of estrogen. So the body's saying, okay, I hear it, I see it, let's go, right? And so early, when you know that these things are starting, you can sort of watch for that. So body odor, pubic hair, those kinds of things may be the adrenal glands kind of kicking in early, right? So you can kind of watch for that. So, and boys are not immune. It's really fascinating. If you look at a lot of middle school boys, they actually have breasts. They have developing breasts. And that's because they're also getting the larger signals of estrogen as well. But when their testosterone kicks in, it kind of pushes down that estrogen level, right? But you'll see that. So they'll get those false signals of estrogen as well. So, and it's not just that our, young girls are walking around with breasts and hips at a young age. The scary statistic is that the earlier a girl enters puberty, the greater risk she's at for cancer and disease as an adult.
Really?
Yeah. And the average girl today actually has exposure to more chemicals than the adult woman.
Yeah, that's terrifying, obviously.
And your skin is your largest organ. So 65% of what you put on your body gets absorbed right into your bloodstream. It's not like it has the digestive system to actually, with the acids and whatever to break it down. It's going right into your bloodstream. So just like you would protect a baby, right? You don't want your baby slathered with chemicals, right? And it's like, okay, now what? We just drop the ball and we just say, okay, yeah, let's slather them. Let's agree, right? And it's as big a deal to keep them away from those chemicals as it was when they were, infants.
So the obvious question is, and it could go to good for you girls and what you do, but okay, I have a 3-year-old. I am typically the one that bathes all 3 of my kids. I've got an 8-year-old, he does his own thing, but I've got our 6-year-old and our daughter, Allegra. They still like to bathe together. So I took your note and I will definitely try to have her start, washing and scrubbing herself. But what products should I be using so I can lower that preference for estrogen kind of coming into their system?
Yeah, so you want to start with anything with a synthetic fragrance, right? Anything with a synthetic fragrance actually covers up a lot of
those.
So don't use anything with a synthetic fragrance. We use essential oils in our products. We use natural scents in our products because we want them to smell good, because obviously you want them to use the product, right? So that's part of the experience, is when they're enjoying a product, they will actually use it. So there's a lot of things. There's parabens, phthalates, dyes, like I said, the fragrance, anything with alcohol, is not a good to have exposure to. Polyethylene glycol, PEG, usually be on a label, PEG, polyethylene glycol. I mean, we have a lot of these ingredients that we've known forever that should not be in skincare products. The European Union actually prohibits a lot of products, the EU, and, a lot of companies will actually make 2 versions. They'll have an American version, they'll have an EU version, that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily that less ingredients is more. but fewer products is better, right? So, and if a company does not disclose what we call the INCI, meaning the entire ingredient list, just don't buy it, right? Because they're certainly hiding something. You're not going to buy a product because it has bullet points of ingredients, right? You want to really look at a label. You want to be critical, and I think that's a huge lesson in this. And a lot of people say, well, the government should regulate and yada, yada. No, consumers have the power. I always put it in, by the time the FDA will regulate something, it's going to be 8 years. And now we have, and now we have new technology, and you got to go through it really stifles innovation. So consumers really have the power. Just read the ingredient list.
So sorry, go ahead.
No. And really make, critical thinking and decisions on that. And, if there's a word you don't understand, Google it, right? Like, what is this? And then is it a chemical base or is it a plant based, right? And so it really comes down to trust as well.
Would boys be in that same, obviously, tact when you're talking about skincare products? I don't want Callan, my 6-year-old, to start getting estrogen early. So basically follow the same rule for the boys.
Yeah, all the same rule for the boys. Boys are wonderful, and people always give me a hard time. It's like, why not boys? And I love boys, but I'm a mom of 2 girls. So for me, it was the emotional, physical connection for me. That's why Good For You Girls, really came to be. But boys, yeah, boys need to be critical as well. Keep them away. You're going to, middle school, they're going to douse themselves with all those chemicals and things like that. There are, nice natural, products out there that have nice natural scents, for men as well. And I think their hygiene is super important, right? They think of it a little bit later. They come into it, right, a little bit later. But, personal care or self-care and feeling good about yourself is more than just not stinking, right? It's taking pride in ownership, right? We own this. And it's like your first car, right? If you're gifted a car, you don't take care of it as well as you would if you saved up your money and bought your first car, right? And I think there's this wonderful lesson and connection to our bodies that we have the ability to teach. You own it, you take care of it. And that message is good also for what they're eating, right? The pride and ownership, right? What goes in comes out, right? It's a very simple, you're going to eat this or that, right? And why does it matter? And that doesn't mean you can't eat, crazy stuff every once in a while. You can't have some exposure to something. But like candles, those home plug-ins, so it's none of that. Again, my daughter's had severe asthma allergies. I was running my first daughter to the emergency room because she would actually stop breathing. It was scary. Yeah. And so, we had nothing. Like, there was no fragrance, no laundry detergent, nothing. I really started from square one and saying, oh my gosh, what are her triggers? They were all respiratory. And then my second daughter, 2 years later, had eczema and a hive disorder. So she had the skin issue. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm the mom doing everything right. What's going on here? Right. So it's really an education for me. And that's why I had so much knowledge. And then when my daughter was 8, she wanted a bath set at Target. It was a Hannah Montana bath set. And she ran to it. And she says, Mommy, can we buy this? And I picked it up and I flipped it over. It was made in China. It had about every dye known to man in it and chemical. And the light bulb went off and I said, oh my gosh, is this really what we're slathering on our children? So it was a shocker for me. And the other shocker was that she was 8 and she wanted it, right? She was paying attention and she wanted
Hannah Montana
in. And that's what's happening a lot more today with the phenomenon of girls in wanting products, because there's this, again, lowering age of puberty, social media, there's this aging up. We have influencers that, these 20-year-old influencers that don't realize it's 12-year-olds watching them. And girls today, we've stolen, I think, social media. It's another conversation, but I think social media has stolen childhood in many ways. And I'm very grateful that boys are not, boys are a little bit better at this, right? They've got their gaming community. They're just different creatures. But girls are really fall prey to wanting to be in this tribe. And that's the other thing too. Again, when we see this social media pull, we know in development in girls, they need downtime, right? So it's journaling, it's arts and crafts, it's these things early in their development that lets them be within themselves in that quiet, shut it down. That is so developmentally important for them. There's a wonderful book. It's called Sleeping Beauties by I can't remember the author's name, but it's an amazing book, and it talks about girls going into sleep, right, like the Sleeping Beauty, and then emerging. And it's it's not the grim fairy tales being kissed by a prince. What it is, it's inward, right? And as women, we are in many ways in society the foundation in so many things as adults. And so that's where so much growth happens in our young girls. And when puberty is happening, the sense of out of control and things like that, those sorts of things are critical to their development, that quiet time and that creative time just to be within themselves. And it gets rid of that FOMO, fear of missing out, when they're grounded in some of those things.
I'll definitely put that book in the description below. I can't resist going down this rabbit hole because you brought it up, and I feel your passion in this, Kim. But you're probably familiar. I'm going to assume you're familiar. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His big approach right now is health in our foods, health in our kids. It's his big thing. He talks a lot with Casey Means, the brother and sister that do a lot of that. We eat a credit card's worth of plastic, I think he said, a week.
Yes,
and the highly processed foods that we eat are profoundly changing our children and causing problems. I'm going to assume that you are familiar with this, both whether in agreement, but can you talk about a little more deeply on that? What your vision is for the future, especially, of course, with food, but in your neck of the woods as well when it comes to.
Yeah, no, it still shocks me today that a lot of people don't know. I mean, again, I've been in this for so long that, when people say, oh yeah, natural products are natural, I'm like, oh my gosh, where have you been? You're living under a rock. Yeah, no, I love that movement. Absolutely. I think we need to talk about it. We need to expose it. And that's why I say we need to make change with our dollars. Right? Convenience comes at a cost, right? So we need to get back to the whole foods. We need to get back to all of those things. And, even in the skincare realm, you talk about the microplastics. And years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was all these scrubs that had these little beads in them. They were plastic. Yeah. And they were plastic.
To exfoliate.
Yeah. And so, now they're in the water, now they're in the streams, now they're in the fish and all that. And there's pictures of the stuck in the sides and this, the flesh of fish and things like that. Well, okay, finally now it realized it. And so the FDA says, okay, this is no longer allowed. But do you know how long that they gave those companies to get those off the shelf? Because they had years of that product sitting there. It was like 7 years. It's like, no, don't just recall it and pull that, off the shelves. No, we'll give you 7 years.
Yeah. So
you know what I mean? Kind of thing. So, but change will happen, but the more we are aware of it. So I'm all for that. I'm all for, again, the grocery store, just the surrounding. I don't eat processed foods, or very rarely do I eat processed foods. It's a meat, it's a vegetable. That's it. And it can sound incredibly boring, but that's just the way. And with my girls, I was making their food and all that stuff, and it was it's work, right? It's work to plan that way, but it's important that we do that, and it's important that we have these conversations and expose, again, the dyes and the microplastics that are happening. And with demand comes change. So even in packaging, and people say the plastics in packaging, unfortunately, technology is slow to innovate, right? So, for my products, we use a PET so that it doesn't leach, nothing's leaching or absorbing into the plastic, and it's also recyclable, but it's a big issue. And as long as we're continuing to move forward with those changes, I think it's a good thing. But social media does help us in that way, where we can educate one another. I love that about social media.
Well, that's a perfect transition, and I appreciate that. I think we could have a full conversation alone just on what's in our food, what's in our products that we put on our body. But social media in particular, you've alluded to it, but let's dive a little bit deeper if we can. You know, I had a presentation. Our kids go to a charter school, and we had a presentation by an individual that travels around the country talking about the horrid problems that social media causes. From a boy's perspective, those boys not necessarily are on social media as much as they are gaming. And they are spending hours upon hours a day gaming themselves and not having the capabilities to move forward. But when he talked about girls, Kim, it scared the heck out of me, because they start out at such an early age, if parents allow them on those devices, which I think we should talk about too. And they get sucked into Instagram, TikTok, all of the other ones. And basically what he said, it truly degrades their childhood, their innocence. Can you talk a little bit more about social media and what it can do to girls, especially as they enter puberty?
Yeah, I think we again, we're talking younger, so we have to understand that the development of critical thinking is not there yet, right? And girls are very tribal. They want to belong. They yearn to belong. And so this is replacing what would otherwise be a small knit community, which is ideal, small group of friends and things like that. This is replacing that. And the lack of transparency from influencers, and I always say influence runs down. So if it's a 20-year-old influencer, it's 12-year-olds watching her. I always think, when I say this, I always think of Justin Bieber, because, and if I know I'm dating myself, but Justin Bieber, you know, when he was a, teen star, you would think that it was, teenagers. No, it was 10-year-olds, right? It was like, it's always comes down. It's younger. And they're not transparent. The industry is not demanding their transparency, right? And that, hey, I'm selling you something. So what I'm hopeful for in having these conversations with people like you and getting my word out is that, don't forget, parents, as parents, you are the original influencer, right? It's permission based. If you need permission, I'm giving you permission today. Get involved, take it away. If they are at a point, see what they're watching. Sit there with your daughters and say, okay, why are you following them? What do you like about that? Let's look. Does it say commission? Does it have a link to a shop? Again, I don't think young people should be on TikTok at all. At all. I think it's just so damaging. And unfortunately, the effects we will not understand. But think of the dopamine and the cortisol we get as adults, right? So we get those dopamine hits. It's incredible at their development, right? And again, not to mention the screen time and their lack of concentration, and lack of focus, and all of that, because it's moving so quickly. But there is a huge difference between a 12-year-old girl and a 22-year-old girl, right? And unfortunately, they are not transparent, or anybody on social media. And it's all a smokescreen. So have the conversation, get involved. And when you see those little, and again, check yourself, right? A lot of parents are, watching their screens too. Again, remember, your kids are watching you, right? And when I talk about the puberty and I talk about girls in puberty, what I also love to tell moms is, now's your time to watch how you take care of yourself, because she's learning from you, right? And when girls are entering puberty, it's usually a time where moms are finally coming out of the crazy young kid stage, but they've sort of lost themselves along the way. That happens too. And as we sort of get ready for perimenopause, what an amazing time to remind ourselves that we matter and that we need to take care of ourselves too. So do it together, right? Kind of thing. But that's why, you have to decide what's right for your child when it comes to social media. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a fan. I think in small doses with whatever. And somebody said, well, you don't want to be the bad guy. I'm like, okay, when has mom ever or dad ever had a problem with being the bad guy? Like, sign me up. It's like, thank me later, but sign me up now, right? I mean, that's not what we're here for, right? We're here to nurture and teach and all of that. The friend stuff I tell you 100% comes later.
In your opinion, what is the age that a daughter, and boys, of course, should be allowed to even have a phone, have social media?
I just don't think that anyone under the age of 14, 15 has enough of critical ability to have that at any uncontrolled amount. I think that, even at the older ages, I think that there needs to be a check on it. My daughters knew that there was absolutely no expectation of privacy on their devices, that I could take it at any time. And I could look, and we could see, and we talk about it, and we would sit there together, and we would look as far as, what they were watching, what was right. And it's a great way to connect to, again, when they're older, be that communicator. If you can start communicating with your children, I mean, you sort of take it for granted when they're little, right? But when they start to push away, and that, that change happens, what's actually happening we know this developmentally, is when they're pushing you, it means they need you to bring them closer, right? Because they need to know they feel safe. I'm walking away. You're going to catch me, right? It's that kind of thing. I need to know you're going to follow me. I need to know. And that gives them a lot of courage to try new things and do things. And if you just get mad at them because of their attitude, which again happens because of what they're going through in the development that you're now empathizing with, we can check ourselves and not say, oh, fine, and those things don't happen. I like to tell the story. My younger daughter used to get very emotional during puberty. My older daughter, not so much, but my younger daughter felt very much out of control a lot during puberty. So saying things, acting in a certain way that she would get a little bit out of control. And so we developed a word. It was pickle, meaning, are you getting yourself in a pickle? My mother used to use that term, so I adopted that. And the word pickle was a safe word, meaning I'm emotional right now. I know I'm hurting you. I know I'm saying things or behaving in a manner that I don't want to. I just don't know how to get out of it. She would say pickle, or I would beat her to it. I'm like, pickle? She'd go, oh my God, pickle. And we would just break and come back together and breathe and do that stuff, right? And again, not too much time, because it's important to address those things, because bad behavior is bad behavior, right? But it was so helpful to us. So I don't know if that would help anybody, any of your listeners at that point.
Such a great tip. And I like that. Just have the word where everybody can just clear the air, leave the room.
Time out, but it's special, right? It's not time out. Because timeout is, we use timeout too in punishment sometimes. Okay, I'm ready to timeout, all right? It's a special word that means I'm understanding. So whatever that word is, it means I understand. We're going to just chill for a minute, right? But it's not a word like chill, because chill, go chill, because that, again, that's offensive, right? So you want something that just is a silly whatever word that just means I totally understand, and we're just going to take a minute.
I love that. Absolutely. So let's get tactical here,
okay.
if you don't mind. One of the people that I follow quite a bit, a couple of people, John Lovell, Nick Freitas, they talk a lot in particular about the women that are out there today that are touting their body count. They're touting the fact that they run around and do those things. And one thing that Nick has always said is he looks at his friends that were that kind of womanizers and say, how do I ensure that my daughter never falls for someone like you? And the thing that he always says is, tell her you love her and be that role model so she knows what to look up to. So when we're talking specifically about how dads, especially at an early age with their daughters, can invoke that both ethos and respect for themselves, can you give us some additional tips of what can dads do to really make their daughters value themselves more?
Yeah, I think language is crucial, right? And like I said, we've already covered, like, puberty is not something to get over. This is an amazing time. Even the conversation with her, sweetie, what you're going through would bring me to my knees. You may at some point use that, right? I can't even imagine what your body's going. What amazing. It's the encouraging conversations, right? Dads have an incredible opportunity. I mean, you are their first love. And so every man will be measured by you. I mean, it's a lot, but you can handle it, right? So it very much starts with that language, and it's of protection as well, right? So we know that men and women are different. Women, just like, women, they're man to be strong for them. Your daughters will learn that as well. It's sort of a silent partner, but not so silent. Dads can't be silent, right? And so making sure you have you time. I mean, that's the other thing too, is, we said, boys and girls, girls go with mom, boys go with, dads. I mean, I think it's important that you're spending time with your daughter. So there's that comfort level there. And she is watching how you treat your wife, treat other females, all that stuff. I mean, she's learning so much subconsciously from your behavior. But yeah, just for that special, that she knows she's special. And it could come with a lot. I mean, there's a lot of pressure too. Again, we're talking high school, and I always gave my daughters permission to use me for an excuse for absolutely anything. Right. And that was actually something that my mother did for me. She said, just tell the boys you don't date. Your mother doesn't let you date. Right. You're in a situation, you want it. Right. And men are wonderful at role playing, thinking of scenarios. Okay. So that can start really young. You're in this situation. You're at a sleepover, right? You're at a sleepover. You don't want to stay over. What do you do? Okay. My dog didn't feel good today. Can I call my mom or my dad and ask how my dog's feeling?
Give them that out.
Dog's fine. So when you get that phone call that says, how's Harold? Whatever, how's Spot? Immediately that you're going to pick up your kid. It's up to you now to make up that excuse why you're there.
It goes right back to what you said about pickle, right? That is their safe word to say they need you.
Safe. It's the safety. And I think the power that you possess in that is amazing. And I always joked with my girls, I said, never date a boy that doesn't have a sister. And there's a lot, because they already instinctively understand women, right? I mean, it's always kind of a thing. So I think that just being part and understanding, the power that you possess in that, to nurture is tremendous. But understand, and yeah, the whole body count thing, that makes me sad. I think we always go through this pendulum swing, and young people, my take on that whole thing is young people are so passionate, especially women, right? They need to have a cause, right? Has to be a cause. And then they get into their 20s and there's a cause there. And again, reclaiming, I'm like, yeah, we've already been there. We've already done that, right? Every generation before you has already fought that battle for women, or has already, right? And it's not, it was a bad movement. Let's be honest. It's a bad movement. And thankfully, I think the pendulum is swinging. I really do. I think the pendulum is swinging back. I think that young women are seeing that this doesn't serve them in the long run, right? And I think that it is swinging back. And it's ego too, right? I think, there's an ego, but you really don't know if that's just all ego or talk or really what's going on right behind the scenes. You don't know. Right. And that's even though, high school conversations. Well, how do you know your friend is doing this? How do you know your friend is up? That could just be, you know what I mean? And those are also conversations. But you don't know. You know what I mean? So it's being true to what makes you feel comfortable. And then also that message too is, having young adult women, it's, I love and support you no matter what. Right. That's, it's a wonderful transition that happens when, they're independent and on their own, and you can sort of see the fruits of your labors. And my daughters really give me a hard time in that vein, because I said, don't do drugs. I was like, don't, right? I had a whole list of don'ts, and they didn't. And I was like, well, they were such, I don't want to say, again, the good girl is a bad term because there's no good or bad, right? But I said, well, I figured if I told you, I gave you kind of meet me in the middle somewhere, right? It's like, but they valued what I had to say. And, what their dad and I had to say. And so they joke about that. Right. And they were like, well, we didn't know you really didn't mean it. And I'm like, well, like I said, I figured you'd meet me halfway somewhere. Right. But of course, what am I going to say? Right. But yeah, they used that out a lot. They used that me as an out a lot. And I think that was a really good thing.
And that's what you're there for. Well, and I'm glad to hear that pendulum is swinging, and it's due to the work that you and many people are. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you why I see that. When you look at the bigger, and I'm a student of markets and watching trends, during COVID, we were very restricted. And so now we're seeing a bit of mass consumerism, right? We're seeing a bit of mass consumerism because we felt so restricted. But now I'm seeing a minimalistic. I'm seeing more of a quality versus quantity shift. And it's a really nice thing to see. And I think this next generation of these alpha girls, this generation, I think they're going to be very, very different than what we've seen. I think they are just going to be more aware of their needs, and they're not going to really settle. I see that trend, and it's a really positive. I think it's a really positive trend.
Well, and I'll go out on a limb and saying the father should have a role in helping to facilitate that vision, right? So let's get tactical. We'll do a rapid fire 20, 30-second answers. If you can just kind of run through these from a dad's perspective. These are some of the burning questions, some of the easy ones, right? And then we'll land the plane here, and I know you're very busy. So first, shaving legs, when to have that discussion. How does all that work for dads?
When she feels insecure about it, and it's okay.
Okay, good. The period talk. If the father and the wife are both in the same house, that's usually something the wife might take on. Mm-hmm. What role does the father have in that? And then if dad is alone, or maybe the wife is not around as much, how does that period talk go about?
First of all, understanding when it happens. And there's, again, understanding the signs to it, right? And having that conversation when and if. Preparation is key. So that she's prepared something in her gym bag, something in her school bag, whatever. So she's always 100% prepared, and have it in your car as well. Wherever
even
you are.
Before you're just assuming it's going to happen in the next 6 months or so.
Have a little bag, change of clothes, always have a change of clothes, always have a few things for her, no matter where you go. Mom's car, dad's car, always.
Ear piercing. When to?
That's sort of personal. Again, when you think she's ready to take care of them, right? When you think she's mature enough to take care of them. And you can also limit studs only, right? Younger, but you can limit studs only or smaller only, so we're not ripping them.
Got it. And then finally, wearing makeup. That's going to come up obviously sooner than later.
And a personal decision. But I always give the advice, if she can wash her face for at least 6 months without issue every day, then she's ready for makeup. So if she can take care of her hygiene for 6 months and take care of her skin, then she can be ready for makeup. Because without that, if she doesn't have that routine down, the makeup's just going to introduce bacteria.
Yeah, and everything we talked about starting.
So she's in the driver's seat. See what happened there? She's in the driver's seat, right? So she has to show it's a regimen, right? So let her drive that ship. And then the other positive is when her skin looks good, she might not want to cover it up with makeup.
Very good point.
Why she wants to wear the makeup.
Fascinating. Okay, so helpful. This is great. We could just continue the conversation forever. I have 2 more questions for you. The first is there anything that you want dads in general to know that we haven't talked about, 20, 30 seconds that you think is super important?
Oh gosh, what's my list? Again, when she pushes, hold her closer, right? And spend time. Like, I think those are the big takeaways of a dad. Your role is more important than you realize. And the language,
Perfect.
Obviously.
Perfect. Before my last question, where can people find you, all the good work that you're doing, and definitely get in with some of your products?
Yeah, so goodforyougirls.com, all spelled out. And there's also an info at, and I love to talk to dads. They make me cry, which is really crazy. They're so wonderful. But info at Good For You Girls will be forwarded directly to me. So if you have questions about the stage where your daughter's in, you need any advice, feel free to reach out. I'm there.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so my final question for you, this doesn't have to be puberty related or even girls related, but one of my role models, Graham Cochran, asked this question at the end of his podcast, and it's a similar question. I call it kind of like your diamond advice. Your daughters are grown now, but if they forgot everything they taught you, that you taught them, what would be one piece of advice that you would want them to keep and be able to move on with their lives?
Oh my gosh, diamond advice. I think it's self-worth. Yeah, wow. Pause. I think it's instinct. Instinct. We've got it. Women have it. And that's another thing during puberty is when that develops as women. That's why being quiet, listen to your instincts. I think that's a huge pause, listen, and then move forward. Trust your instincts. They're there for a reason.
Fantastic. Yeah. I would love to have you back. This was such a great conversation. We could continue it for many hours.
I think it's wonderful what you're doing with dads. It's go dads, right? I think it's wonderful. So,
Kim Grustas, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thanks
for having me.
Have a good one.